What is up, Rory?
Hello, Adam.
We are here without Scotty. We are the Jews taking over this podcast today. Scotty is on a beach in Mexico.
That sounds
I still,
nice.
I still feel like he could have done a podcast from the beach in Mexico.
I mean, only if you really enjoyed doing this and didn't think of it as work, because you could be hanging out with a drink, getting it
Oh,
done.
maybe we don't even give it back to him. Maybe this is now the Singer Brothers
The
podcast,
Singer Brothers. I was thinking maybe this would be episode one.
learning how to fight with the Singer Brothers. So I want to talk about a couple of things. First thing I want to talk about is I just got back from the NFL draft, and I find it. I don't know if you do this now. I think you do this when you watch your daughter play soccer and go to soccer practice, but I look at everything through the lens of what we do now. And so ecological psychology and ecological dynamics has made this much bigger impact on my life than just affecting how we coach the gym.
Yeah,
Right? It's become somewhat of a worldview, but I also filter everything, especially in sports, through it. And so I listen to I'm a big draft fan. You know that, obviously.
of course.
I've been watching it since I think eighth grade is the first time I sort of took off school to watch it. It was in the afternoon. It was broadcast on a local channel. No one gave a shit about it, but I was fascinated and I think what I was most fascinated with was how people were looking at athletes and making these decisions that had billion-dollar impacts. Maybe, at least now they have these billion-dollar impacts. And I listened to why people choose certain people and when they choose them. And it amazes me how often choices are maybe not completely made, but they are affected by things that have nothing to do with football, right? Because they have the ability to watch every play a guy had in his college career. So
For sure.
you were talking about thousands of snaps of film you could watch, and yet they still make them run, and they measure them, and they make them do these drills that have nothing to do with football, and then they use all that data to talk themselves in or out of the things that the film tells them. Very strange to me.
The idea that they would need anything more is, yeah, looking at it through the lens we look at things now is related to sports and practice and stuff. It seems silly. And then you're going to have pages and pages from the analysts about how this guy's arms are really short, but he did all these amazing things. So they weren't sure about it because his arms were short, but
Right.
yet he did all these amazing things. Like, did you think that was fake?
Well,
Those
so
are the
what
same
they
guys he's fighting.
Yeah, so there's the guy with the short arms, a guy named Ruben Baines from Miami, and so he has arms that are, and again, they've collected this data forever, and we've seen some of this data and talked with other people in other sports that have this data, and they have so much data that they can say, okay, this guy's arms are so short, he's not just an outlier. No one like him has ever been successful, and so they say he might have been successful at the college level, but when he gets to the pro level, he will not be able to do those things because his arms are too short. And I guess what happens is if you're the person making these choices, if you take an outlier and they don't make it, you lose your job.
Sure.
So it is much safer just to take someone who's not an outlier. If they don't make it, which 50% of the guys don't anyway, then you don't lose your job. And if they do make it, you look like a genius, even though everyone knew he was good in college. The one that really stuck out to me is there was a wide receiver who got drafted. And the knock on him was that he had a hard time catching a football in college. And I'm like, wait, that was his only job.
That's about it.
And this is where sort of that ecological crossover is. They assume when he gets to the NFL, some coach will teach him some technique that will then allow him to catch the football, which he
Better.
couldn't do better. And I that was what that maybe that's the biggest issue, right? Is coaches thinking that they can just teach anyone to do anything.
And so, devil's advocate, maybe they can teach. So let's say they could teach someone for a
Okay.
second. It's not going to happen. You are not going to move past all your previous things. You know the scientific terminology, the things that were attractors. You're not going to move past all this kid's attractors that kept him from catching a ball in like a season or in a couple of practices preseason. He's going to need some time. So to get
But
all
maybe
that
he's
for
just not
athletics,
maybe he's just not good at catching the football.
that's what I'm
Like,
saying. So even if you could fix it, if
right.
you could, it's not going to happen in a season. He's had 20 years of however he was catching the
Well,
ball and dropping it.
more than that, now he's trying to catch the football versus even better guys. So it's the same thing. Like if you're worried that the short arms are going to really show up versus better opponents, then why is his inability to catch a football? And let's not get, I mean,
Sure.
we're splitting hairs now between one guy and the other guy and saying he dropped the ball 10, but dropping the ball 4 or 5 times in a season in college is a big deal, um, because that's all he's supposed to do.
A lot of putting
And
a lot
so,
of athletics on the line. We're going to build up
and
for with his athletics.
right. And it's not like the coaches in the NFL are different coaches from the coaches in college. I mean, that's where they're chosen from usually. And so the idea that some magical wide receiver coach will teach him how to do the only thing that he's really supposed to do just strikes me as funny.
Yeah, and it puts it all in this kid's hand. It was his hands that were the problem because he dropped the ball. So we'll fix how he catches it. He won't drop it when there's way more involved in his ability to catch a football than just his hands on.
Right. And so use the flip side of that. And I know I don't want to turn this into a football podcast, but I think that when we talk about any other sport, I think a lot of it still should resonate with MMA coaches. The flip side is they'll question how a guy catches the ball. Does he catch it with his hands? Does he catch it in his body? Does it? And I'm like, does it matter? And maybe it does. Maybe that's where I don't know enough about the game itself. But I would think catching a football is the most important thing for that guy. If he's effective at it, it'd probably be easier to fix or help him if he's already effective than if he's dropping a football. I don't. Anyway, um, we had a disappointing result in the fight on Saturday, right? Results, not performance.
Took it out. It happens. But yes, not performance. Results for sure.
And what do we learn? What do we learn from that as coaches?
We learn to be more aware, I guess, of the opponent, his size, maybe. I don't really think it was an experience thing because I only really think experience in the cage is to get comfortable in the cage. So our fighter's been comfortable in the cage since he began.
Right.
Never looked uncomfortable in maybe 4 or 5, whatever it's been fights. This is the second pro fight. But there are probably limitations as to size discrepancies and things of that nature that should be taken into account. A fighter should be able to keep his weight a little bit better throughout the year to so that he doesn't have to take catch weight fights. And that's on both. That's on the coach. That's on the athlete. But we have to approve the fights in the end. And if we just didn't really think about that, maybe we didn't think the kid was going to come in or have been cutting down from so much. Really was just 5 pounds away from the normal weights. But you live and learn, and you do a better job the next time. And you hope that fighter keeps in a little better shape and keeps his weight where it needs to be, so that he's not thinking, well, these opportunities only come so often, which is definitely something that goes to be that in UFC all the time. Guys want to fight. They can't always get fights because there's so many guys. So you want him to be closer so that when it's time to take that fight, because they are limited, it's the right fight and not the fight you think you need to take, something you want to take.
Right. Yeah. We don't want him to have to. You don't think so? I get what you're saying about experience in the cage, right? But I think that a guy with 1 pro fight versus a guy with 9 pro fights, there is something to be said for those 9 times where that professional is geared up for 5-minute, 3 5-minute rounds. There is still, I think, a significant experience difference, even if it's not the ability to be comfortable in the cage. I still think there's a tremendous experience difference between 1 pro fight and 9 pro fights.
That could be true. Then we'd have to ask how do some of these guys who step in with a lot of wrestling experience, who have never really even done MMA before, fought on an amateur level, and very quickly go from having trained for only a year or so, sometimes, to dominance or success.
But I'd argue those are hundreds of fights.
Okay.
Right. I mean, hundreds of times gearing up and driving to an arena and making weight and rehydrating, all of the things surrounding, more than just being comfortable stepping in there. So maybe our fighter didn't have the adrenaline dump that a young fighter has, and any of that, but there was a lack of experience. And I think it shows in just how you can maybe that's when we talk about skill, the more experienced you are, the more able you are to adapt to what that situation is.
Sure. That's certainly possible. I think this fight was certainly had some other unfortunate variables, but as a whole, I wouldn't disagree with that.
So what I learned, I think, is for me, and I had this discussion with some of the guys last night, including the guy that fought and our the pros and stuff, is that the work done in the room, and again, we look at this as a system. right? Nothing. I wouldn't make a triangle and say these pieces are here and then these pieces, these pieces. I'd make a big, when you take all the words that you use and you make them into that like graphic. I think it looks more like that than it does a triangle. And this is built on this is built on
Sure.
this.
It's all part of the environment.
It's all part of the environment. It's all part of the system. Whatever words you want to use. I think that there are pieces in the system that maybe I and you as the coaches have not stressed enough. When we had our first group of guys making runs at the UFC, at titles, and all those things, we used to get up with them at 5 in the morning and go work out with them, right? So they knew that weight room stuff was of utmost importance. Like they knew that they needed to go do some road work. And so I think that maybe those are some aspects of this new group that we have not stressed enough is weight room, strength, the cardio done outside, off the mat, out of the room, nutrition, recovery. We talk about those things, but have we really provided them enough information? I mean, we know the information is out there. It's easy to get. It's free, but we are still the guides.
So then you'd have to take a look then to your idea of not handholding, because they know those things exist. We've certainly talked about them to some degree, which I mean, we definitely not ever talked about strength training and conditioning and road work and things of that nature.
Right. And the weight room is next to, right? We built a weight room.
You walk through that thing like that in my house, and you're in
right.
the weight room.
Right.
So, and you don't want to handhold them because
I don't,
because we got other things going on also. And yes, we're coaches and we are there for our athletes, but it can't all be upon us because then
no,
too much.
I'm not suggesting.
But there needs to be a little bit more of just, I guess you stay on top of it more. You were constantly at least asking, hey, you guys getting in the weight room this week? Have you guys done your road work this week? Maybe it's just a reminder. So you're not going to take them to do it. They know that you are very smart about strength and conditioning. Coach Steve is very smart. Like, they know the information exists. We have told them multiple times, ask the questions, you will get the information, because we can put our hands out to a lot of people to help. So maybe it's just being that overbearing parent with a overbearing coach. Right. Hey, you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing, and just looking at a couple of them. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Right. And I don't care. Like, I don't want yes, but, or no, but either. I don't really care. I'm asking the question just to remind the athlete that these are the expectations. Whether you do it or not, it's going to show up. Right. Like our fighter for Saturday, he's a bit of a tweener. In a lot of worlds, he is being recommended to cut to 125. Because we have another pro 135er, and when you look at them side by side, and we have another amateur 135er, and when you look at all three of them side by side, one of these things does not look like the other. And this goes to, we could go full circle to this football thing, but there probably is a set of attributes, body attributes or morphologies, shapes, sizes, lengths, whatever, that are more successful at each weight class than others. And so I'm not suggesting, I don't want to tell anyone to cut another 10 pounds and hate life. But there is another option, which is bulk up a little bit.
For sure.
It won't make him longer. But if he's going to be in more wrestling type of situations, if he's going to be in more clinch type situations because he's a little shorter, and being a little stronger would never hurt anybody.
No, and you had them last night. I had them the night before. I had just the guys and girls who were fighting. And I basically said to them, like, we are in a weight class sport. It is incumbent upon you to be the biggest and strongest you can be at the lowest weight that you can comfortably and safely make. And you have no idea what that is until you start packing it on somehow, whether with strength training, and they're like, okay, well, I'm getting too bulky, so now I'm walking around too heavy. Okay, well, now you dial it in so you stay as big and strong as you need to. You don't put on muscle mass. You're getting the cold plunge because you don't get as muscular, I guess.
No, you just change the way you lift. I mean, as far as talking
you know
about
that better
this,
than I do,
right?
but you just find it.
Yeah,
you find it.
Right, you can get stronger. You can get very strong without gaining too much size. I mean, look at the guys who are, power lifters or weight Olympic lifters. You can do that
for sure. Yeah. So you just then go and do that. If you want to be serious in this sports or in any sport, if you want to have a career, if you want to be a professional athlete, then there are things you need to do. And maybe it takes loss where some of that comes into play And then there's a moment in that fighter's journey, the hero's journey, where he or she says to themselves, I didn't like that. I don't want that to happen again. And I'm going to go fix it. And better
Right.
that happens earlier for whatever reasons than at 10-1 and you're on the doorstep. Figure that out at 1-1. Like I figured it out training with Forrest. I'm eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at night to keep weight on, losing weight the week of weigh-ins because I always cut weight very easily. And I'm training with Forrest at 205 pounds coming down from 230. I'm like, how can he and I be in the same weight class? And then it was like, all right, well, I'm going to do all these things I'm still doing because I need to keep weight on and get stronger. But now I'm going to cut to 185.
Right. And in today's MMA, I might suggest you cut to
I've seen,
170.
listen, I might be 50 next month. It's still April 30th. I might be 50 next month, but I've seen myself weighed in. That would have been like 15 pounds of water weight. That would have killed me. I'm still 6'2".
I still like you to give it a shot.
7% body fat when I weighed in. I got that one photo when I fought Jason McDonald, and I looked good.
Give it a shot. That's all I'm saying. You could have given it a shot.
And then Then I went to go train at Militich's, and I'm training with Jeremy Horde and Tim Sylvia and Matt Hughes, and I'm on the ground, and he tried to put my head through a wall. So I'm like, going down
I don't know.
wasn't going to be the thing.
No, 170. Right, 170 is.
Still get beat up by Matt Hughes.
Yeah, you can't hide. You can't hide at 170. That's for sure. That is, I think if you draw a bell curve, I'd expect the majority of the best guys to be at 55 and 70.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we can't go back in time.
We can't fix that.
But I think it just highlights all the things that go into being successful as an athlete, and I don't know if does all that become this definition of skill, because the more physically capable you are throughout the fight, the more you are able to do the things that you need to or want to or whatever that is. Like that's why we could talk about it separately. The doctor that was on the other day, his idea of skill was intention and action. But at some level, you also have to be able to stop the other person's intention. And maybe it's the same thing. Maybe they're just words. But when you are fatigued,
for sure,
and there are guys we see that have like the cardio superpower or the power superpower, the chin superpower. But if you're not blessed with those things, then you have to spend your entire career either hiding those things from other people, building those things to whatever level you can. And that's, that's just the way life is. If you got short arms, then you better be good at other things.
Works for Sean Shirk. He was really good at having a tremendous gas tank, being very strong. Just to look at him, you could see that.
Yeah.
But he took those short arms and that gas tank and that strength. A guy of his muscle mass who had a tank like Forrest in his prime or Uriah Faber, like he could go. So he's one of the best guys in that weight class. But he had the tools. Obviously, he was a good fighter, but then he had these other things that you were genetically gifted with. Now you maintain them, but you were genetically gifted with those things.
You think every athlete has something?
What do you mean?
Like if we could parse out all the qualities a person has, right? Do you think that we could uncover in every athlete something that could form the basis of what everything else looks like? Like as an example, like cardio, right? Or like a gas tank, or length, or power, or chin, or speed, or something. Or are there just guys?
The thing that we say, okay, well, this is the thing we're gonna build all our skill towards. This is the thing he's best at. Yeah, I mean,
let's not say skills, but build whatever.
Yeah, you look at a guy like Khabib, and he had a gas tank. His stand up wasn't great, but he could pressure, cage, take down, beat you up on the ground.
Right, but he has to, like, if you're going to pressure, then you have to have other mental and physical. So like sure. maybe we can't parse them out into some kind of, but maybe there's a spider graph. You've seen the spider graphs. I think the UFC Institute does them. Maybe there's a spider graph that takes all these things into account. I don't know what we'd do with that information. We'd still train in the normal same way, and it would develop on their own. But I just in a perfect world.
Sure. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you train all those things anyway, because if you're like, all these things are important, and then you're gonna, if we're gonna create games for that, or experiences for that, I'm not sure you could parse all those out and then build on each one. I think it all has to happen together anyway.
Right. I think they make the choices, but I think that, and maybe that what I'm actually saying is what we shouldn't do, what maybe other coaches do, is try and turn people into something they're not. And we should just let them become what they are, but maybe we nudge them, maybe according to what they are as a human being, that person, their form of life. Can we nudge them a little bit into one path or another just based on that form of life? Like if a guy has a weak chin, we might nudge them away from being a
Rock and sock him.
swinging, yeah, wang and bang type of fight.
Sure, but wouldn't he also likely figure that out in the gym, possibly, or maybe for a little bit safer in the gym, not gym, but he's going to step into one of his first fights. He's going to fight that way, and hopefully he doesn't get knocked out, beat up, but he's going to get beat up a little bit, and then if he does get touched, he might get knocked down once or twice, and the fight gets stopped as an amateur because the wrestler's saving, and then he comes back and they're like, hey, maybe that's not the way you should be fighting.
But maybe he has dynamite in his hands and he doesn't figure that out until, because what you said, go back for a second. Scotty and I talk about this all the time, is that if we are in an ethically driven room, then there are some corrections that don't occur in the room if the fighter doesn't like see them, I guess. Because like I try and tell the guys, if every time you get hit, every time you get touched in a room, no matter how hard it was, I think that you have to pay attention to that.
Could have been the one.
Because it's just a little bit, whether it's the one, and if it wasn't this partner, it's other people. But asking them to pay attention to something like that and actually making the behavioral changes are different things. Right? So if head trauma wasn't an issue, then we would still try and ethically train, because we don't want the guys, it's hard to build a culture where guys are beating the shit out of each other.
For sure.
But I think they would leave every session with more of a behavioral change than if they have to sort of be a little more introspective about how the session went.
Sure. We press upon them all the time. Hit, don't get hit. They also hear, don't no rock and sock and robots, things like that. So
we build the drills around that.
All of those things certainly together, you hope. We don't think our words have changed a lot of behavior, but hopefully they can internalize the words and maybe over a period of time can change their own behavior by hearing, hey, you're getting touched a little too much. I need you to be a little more aware. It's not just hit. You got to learn how to defend some of these things. Stand in the pocket. It's firefight. Someone's gonna fall down. We watched the dude point in the middle of the cage for 10 seconds and somebody fell down. That's what happens in a fight. So I think all of it, again, you got to build the games around it, there's drills around it. You got to build, even if our words, that we still have to share our knowledge, and 30 something years of experience. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of fight footage being seen. It's
right. But saying like they know that the job is to hit and not get hit. Everybody in our room knows that. Everyone in every room, everywhere that's striking knows that.
They don't always do it though.
Right. And so the words and seeing it and the knowledge about that don't matter. So maybe we have to find ways to, like, I always wonder if we're doing enough offense, defense type work, if we're doing enough defensive type work. I don't want to separate defense from offense. In my eyes, there is no separation, but we got to improve defense. And if they are in a room where they can take shots, will they improve their defense? Like separated from jiu-jitsu, right? When you roll, you get submitted. It is a very cut and dry. And the effect of that on your behavior is immediate. And I just wonder if we have to do a little bit of a better job, because we are protecting them, of doing more drills where they can change those behaviors.
I guess if you're doing more of something, you're doing less of something else.
Well, I wouldn't decompose it. It would be smuggled in, right? So like a sniper drill is an offense-defense drill. It's an offense-defense counterpunching drill where we just smuggle in those things. Sure. So I'd be very careful to decompose anything. But the old wall drill that we did forever, that wasn't a bad drill. That taught them that their reaction to being overwhelmed or not being able to move their feet should be to make themselves small and cover everything up. I still think that's valid.
It's place in a practice, for sure.
I haven't done that in a while. I need to get back to that. I haven't done any sort of offense, defense stuff in a while. We used to warm up with a lot of that.
I'm not sure if that's why anybody wins or loses the fight,
No,
but
no, no. This is a different discussion. We've gotten past
sure.
that.
All right.
Our fighter lost the other night because there were things in the entire system that need to be improved, and we will work on those. And it goes all the way from matchmaking to road work and everything in between.
Sure thing. Okay.
Um, and I'm just talking in general now. In our room, in any room, like what are the things like that we can improve, and we have to take into account that we are not letting the room make all the corrections for us because we don't want that to occur. We don't want guys in the room to get wobbled and then hope
Oh
that
no,
they,
if that's what you
you
mean,
know,
then no, you
yeah,
can't.
no, that's what
No,
I mean. It's like representative design of the practice. We can never in our room we can never get too representative because mistakes don't put you on your ass. Now there are a couple practices a week where I do think a mistake could put you on your ass.
I mean, of course, something not everybody's doing the most perfect job, but of controlling themselves. And it's a
Right.
big room, but you do your best. We
But
haven't
we
had
don't.
anyone go home with a headache. We haven't had anyone go home with a
Um.
concussion. We haven't had to pull
No.
anybody from a fight because of a head injury. There have been other
But is
injuries,
that
but we
is
haven't
that a
had that.
good thing?
I think so.
From from a ethical standpoint, we agree.
Sure.
But are we robbing our guys from some level of experience by not putting them into some like if they go somewhere else, and this is what Forrest said this, and there were two parts of it.
We talked
If
about
they
this. Sure.
spar with people they don't know, who are not going to be as safe or as caring, um, are we robbing them of some of that experience?
Well, I think that's what you then probably want to put them into a kickboxing fight or a Muay Thai fight or have them go wrestle or box or do other things. Now, if you can't get them to a place to do that, another gym, then you set up some fights. You fight more as an amateur than maybe. You fight more as as doing other arts where that you get that anxiety of competing if you can't find it in another room. If you can find another room, then sure. But I think that's the only thing. They get into exchanges in the gym. They just don't kill each
Okay.
other. We try to get them to be fast. They get after it. They're just not
They do. I'm not.
killing each
Yeah, I'm
other.
not. Right. I'm
So
not
what they're miss,
intimating.
no, no, I know that. But so what they're missing is the anxiety, like the gorilla cup. You go out, it's your people, but now it's a little bit more on the line. It's a little bit more. There's a little bit more anxiety about it. Jits hits on a Thursday night, no gi. Even as a coach, would like that always gets you a little bit more pumped because now there's a little bit more consequence. But we know the consequence is not going to be dire. So what they're really missing is some of that anxiety. Be able to train at the level we want them to train at, and they do in the room, but with also the anxiety of sort of the unknown. Because if
So
that
I,
dude
I
gets,
want to push back a little bit. I still think there's a difference between anxiety and the pressure and chaos and consequences. I think those are still two different things. And I
but you
don't,
don't want
and
them to suffer the consequence when they
no,
leave.
I don't. I
The
don't.
so it's the idea of consequence because you don't want them to actually suffer the consequence because there's no benefit to getting cracked and getting
No,
dropped. You can't fix that. You can't train that out of you. So
no.
you know you're capable. Maybe you also might get a little gun shy. It's a possibility, but hopefully not. So it's a threat of consequence. Are there other? I don't know. I don't know how you get that threat of consequence without thinking that there's consequence, and that would be with someone else. So that would either be in a room or in a fight.
I think it's probably at some point guys need to experience some training with some other people. I think maybe we've insulated our room in some senses a little bit too much. We have visitors and we let them spar and they train together, but there's something to be said for you go somewhere else where you are the visitor and everyone else is looking to give you their best work. Now I don't know where that is in Georgia. I've spoken to someone further away that has a room that we'd have to travel to Augusta. Ugh. But
Probably an hour and a half, hour and 40. It's not that
it's
far.
all right.
It is.
Um, but maybe we need to or take the guys to Birmingham. Like we owe Chris a trip
For sure.
to
So they do that.
Birmingham.
It's a good group of dudes there. They're hopefully, they get after it. You hope that there's, no major consequence, but certainly, I mean, we just had that, on Saturday. Alex was the only guy who went, but he got some good rounds and figured
Yeah.
out, but hopefully figured some things out, but got to put on a little bit. He did very well.
Okay.
Guys
I
half
can't
his age.
He came back with a little bit of a shiner.
Yeah, but he did very well. Threw his
Yeah,
kid
did
off the
great.
wall, and did his
Did great.
thing. So yeah, in the same vein, there's a guy who's mostly been insulated in the room, who then went into another room and performed very well.
Right. I think that's for even if it's just for confidence.
Sure. So I don't
But
know.
I
So
think
how much
those
of that do you
reps,
need? You
yeah,
need
I
some of
don't.
it.
Right. I
You
think
need
you
a
need
little
some
bit
of
of
it.
it.
I think those reps are just different reps. And if we're talking, we talk about repetition without repetition and representative design. Those reps are different than the reps you get on a normal basis in a room with your partners.
Sure, for sure.
And I think we should get a few more of those.
That's what we have to do.
And not and I don't know if that's for everyone at every stage of their development. I'm not saying that because
No,
I
the guys who
agree.
are fighting. The guys who are fighting.
The guys who are fighting.
And if anybody else wants to come, by all means come. But
Sure.
as your coach, I am telling you, get your schedules situated, because we're going to go do this on this day.
Right.
You don't have a choice in the matter. Fix your
Yeah, that
shit, and we're
goes
going.
against right. I have a hard time doing that. But I get it. I get it.
They're not
And
going to do
that's
it on their own.
no,
They're
no,
not.
they
They're
won't.
just not.
No, but, and it's very tough to, there were days where we had, there were rooms where people could visit and it was easier to travel. It's cheaper to travel. Travel is difficult and expensive now. So, but I think locally we can do a little bit more. The problem is, and there are some local gyms that have groups of guys that would be fun to go train with, but we fight them. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe my mentality on that needs to change a little bit.
But
There's a
like you've always
difference.
said, when people come to our room, who we could possibly fight, or teammates could possibly fight, because we certainly had those people come in the room.
Yes.
You always, or we thought someone was a spy from another gym back in the day. We always then say, what is someone going to learn in a
Right.
couple of hours? So what are those people going to learn about you in a couple of hours?
Right. When they come to us, I keep them safe.
Sure.
Right. So any visitor that comes to our room, I treat them like one of our own. I worry about our guys going other places, but that's why we have to go with them.
So because that idea is in opposition of what you're trying to accomplish by having them train with other people.
I could still step in if it gets too.
Sure. Yes, but sure. Yes, you could step in. So someone has to go.
Someone has to go.
Who's
You have to
willing
take
to
these
say,
guys.
hey, I need you to tone that down with my guy.
You need to rent a van and drive
Or do
these
you
guys
just let them
around.
take care of themselves? If that's what you want, if someone's going to put that kind of heat on them, then yes, the outcome could be a knockout. But then wouldn't you also then hope that the coach there would be like, hey, you guys need to, but you're out. It's a fine line, but
It's a fine line.
But you would then be getting exactly what you wanted.
It's a fine line. It's a fine
We
line.
used to have a guy in the room back in the day. You'll know who I'm talking about, where we have some of our friends come from other places, and they would train and they get hurt, they get hit, and very butt hurts, and cry about it in the corner, and then they didn't get knocked out, just got it put on them, and then you know very quickly he ain't the one. He can't handle this level of heat, so to say, for lack of a better word. It's too early in the morning, but he can't handle this level of heat. And it wasn't like he was going to get knocked out, but yeah, he got touched up. So if you want guys to get that, then maybe you don't go, because maybe you would put the brakes on something that
maybe
they're comfortable with. So you don't know.
Look, this is why I wish they could get. I wish they can get. People always point to like the ties. They say the ties don't spar hard. I'm like, well, because they fight every week. But the Dutch spar hard because they don't fight every week. Boxers spar hard because they don't fight every week. And I wish, and I know wish in one hand, shit in the other, but I wish they could get more frequent amateur fights. And I think if we got rid of weight cutting I think if the amateur sport was separated from the professional sport, where we could just get a cage, get a commissioner, get a doctor, and run 30, 40 amateur fights on a Saturday in a gym, all the guys could get a lot more experience. It would be like boxing.
Sure.
Right? Their USA Boxing is able to do that because it's separated from the professional sport. But in Georgia and most places, there are amateur fights and pro fights, and they're all treated very similarly. And it limits the amount of fights that occur.
Yeah, like sanctioned smokers, basically.
Sanctioned smokers. And put on, and I would love that, And if it was sanctioned smokers, then a ref could step in and just stop them very quickly because they're not real fights.
Stop them from doing what?
From the fights, from anyone getting injured, like you do in a Gorilla Cup.
People are still going to get knocked out if they're
People will
swinging
still
that
get
hard.
people will still get knocked out. People will still get knocked out. But the majority of amateur fights do not end via knockout. And so with bigger gloves and matched up well, I know it's not going to happen, but it would be to the benefit of everyone. And then I would never worry about it being done in the room or traveling to other places. Like that would be your traveling to another place.
So you would invite local gyms to that then, because you would need
I'd
people.
invite everybody. I would invite anybody. You'd sign up. There'd be no weigh-ins. Look, if we could just get rid of the weight classes for a while.
Or there would be a weigh-in, and you would just match up people of similar weight. Like you said, like the Gorilla. How many, like they do in amateur boxing when you go somewhere. My guy's got 3 fights. He's 2-1. Your guy's got this one. How many fights? Cool. 5. Cool. How you win? Awesome. Let's fight.
Right. And that's become harder over the years as well because amateur boxing is not very big in this country.
And it's certainly harder in amateurs because everyone needs to cut weight and everyone needs, all this time. And but no, that would certainly, I don't know, it would not change your practice design in the room.
No.
And how you train to fight, but it would allow you to deal with some of those other variables we discussed.
Yeah, I think a guy could fight if weight cutting wasn't an issue and the ending of the fights were more controlled by a ref. Right? Like a guy gets dropped, it's over. There's a 1 drop rule. There's you're mounted and you're not getting out rule or whatever it is.
They're not real fights. They can do whatever you want them to be.
They're not real fights, but they are more pressure. There's more representativeness because you don't know the people. And you could have a couple fights versus the same person. You see that in amateurs, like in the Midwest, the guy in the amateurs has fought the same guy 3 or 4 times.
Over the course of some amount of months, for sure.
Yeah. But I think that would go a long way. And guys, if we weren't worrying about cutting weight, guys would all walk around the same weights and they could fight 12 times in a year. Imagine we could get a guy's whole amateur career out of the way with 10 to 20 fights in 2 years. It would also tell you a little bit about the guy's durability. It would tell them a lot about themselves. You lose, and then next month you're back in instead of 3 or 4 months of rumination.
Yeah, just it is hard to get better at competing if you're not competing. And yes, we could go do other things. So you have to add some other competitive aspects because you walk into a jiu-jitsu tournament and that dude could very easily break you if you get, that's a different level of experience. Boxing, like we became USA Boxing certified. I'm a USA Boxing coach. This guy.
All right.
Wrestling tournament, just anything where there is a risk, there's a consequence. You get picked up in a freestyle tournament and drop right on the back of your neck.
Right.
Because the only way to get better at competing is competing. And if you go from amateurs to pros, now depending on what you want to do with your pro career, the winning and losing aspects become way more important. And that might limit you to how much you're going to do it. Because you might not take that fight on, 3 days notice or 8 days notice or 1 day's notice like I used to in a day. People might not do that anymore.
Right. So if you know me as well as you do, then I spent an entire night the other night saying, why didn't we get more amateur fights? Like, why didn't we work this out? Why didn't we build this more? Why didn't we work through these problems? Like, should all of our guys have 10 amateur fights before we even have a discussion? But how do we get 10 amateur fights? That could take 3 fucking years the way it is.
But is that terrible if a guy's 20-something years old and in 3 years, now he's 23 or 24?
No.
Because we could have easily have told, but they both really wanted to go pro. So
and they're adults.
They're 20, they're 21, 22, they're adults. Or do you do a better job of making a young fighter realize, hey, you're not in a rush. Go get a job. Like, that's part of it also. Certain people have certain pressures they got put on themselves. So then how do you explain to someone, hey, like, you don't have to, you're not in a rush. You could be 28, 29 and moving into your physical prime and have trained a lot and fought a lot. And do you need to rush this?
Yeah.
So maybe that is on us as coaches
Maybe.
as and but you certainly, again, you can't go back in time. You can only try and move forward. And then but then what happens when you tell that person, you tell that fighter, hey, there's no need to rush. You can get a lot more experience. Probably still even be an amateur, get some sponsorship and stuff. That's more about your social media presence than it is really what you're doing in the cage as a pro or an amateur. And if
Right,
they're
but we just discussed it's hard to get that experience as
yeah,
an amateur because there are not a lot of outlets. And most of the other things you talked about, like, cost money, right? So we're not going to send guys to the IBJJF tournaments. It's 100 something bucks, and they're not focused on jujitsu. Like boxing, I think amateur boxing is free, right?
it's pretty cheap. I imagine it's not free.
Hopefully, Oblast has more of those kickboxing tournaments. I don't know. Maybe we look into AAU wrestling. Is there a novice division in wrestling?
I think for kids, but I don't know for adults. Like,
We can get some
remember, like
fake.
you
We
went
can
and
get
did
some
a
fake
summer,
IDs.
you went and did a summer freestyle tournament
I
once.
did, but I had just graduated high school and I was 17 years old,
Like
so I
you
was
went
able
open.
to.
No,
I
thing with
competed in high school, I think, or the 18 and under.
so,
We get some fake IDs like the Cubans do, and let them compete against just for the experience.
is that his wife and kids over there? Are you sure he's 20?
It happened in Little League, so I don't see why.
That kid looks like he's 13.
I think that recently happened where some team figured out that they had signed, like, they
I
thought they were
saw,
signing a 13-year-old and he was like 20 or something like
I
that.
saw that. It's like, can we all just agree that you knew and just were hoping no one else would find out? Like,
No, let me. In that case, they didn't know because they were signing him to a major league contract. And in Major League Baseball, they think that if they can sign these guys as young as possible, they can get them into their development system.
Gotcha. So they
So
have like 10 years or something to develop
right,
it.
they got duped.
Gotcha.
Now the Little League coach knows
Yes. Okay.
because,
Fair enough. Okay.
yeah, he wants to win. And the high school
Sure.
basketball coach who has some kid who's possibly 25, like from Africa, he knows.
Yeah.
He knows because the guy has a wife and kids.
That's right.
I think that this is, I think the thing that ecological dynamics has really opened up for me mentally is how, not just how complex it all is, but how little of it I actually control, like as a coach. Like I used to think that I
Unless you
had.
want to be overbearing, unless you want to be
No,
completely
I don't
utterly
mean that
overbearing.
way. I don't mean it that way. I think that I could be like a more of a taskmaster, and it still wouldn't have the effect that most coaches think they have on things, right? Like everything we've said is there are all these things they have to do, and they have to get tremendous amounts of experience and in the room, out of the room, in the competition, and without that, we can't control that. We can't control how they react to that. We can't control a lot of that. And so sometimes it makes me feel like I'm not doing a good job as a coach. And sometimes it feels like I have no control over anything. And it was easier when I thought we could program guys. And I thought it was easier when we could joystick guys and game plan and all those things that we can't do for real. But it gave us some semblance of thinking we were in control, an illusion of control.
An illusion of control. So I
Illusion.
mean, so then maybe that's the real battle, and maybe that's why I take these things. I take these things much better than you do. I
It's
always
not
have.
just right, but it's not just that. I think the losses are our fault,
Sure.
right? And
I
again,
know
it's
you've
hard.
always
Like,
said that. You've always said that.
and I don't, and I'm not saying that as a martyr, right? I'm saying like from taking a fight maybe we shouldn't have at a weight class at a time. That's our fault, not telling them, hey, you do this other work or you don't fight. You keep yourself at this weight or you don't fight. Those are things we can control.
Sure.
So those aspects of any loss are our fault. I was happy to hear a teammate of his say this was not a skill issue. Like he wasn't. And so at least I'm happy that I think that what we are doing in the room is working. We had another person tell us that our fighter looked really good considering the gap in experience and stuff. So I'm happy about that. But I take the losses the same way they take them, right? The losses hurt way worse than the wins feel good.
Sure, and I think in this is a little bit of an outlier case because, and so getting back to you take the losses worse than I do. I agree with you in this case but there are other cases where fights are just fantastic and should should, could, and should, and don't always go the finest way. And I still think you take those losses
Well,
as
those are
badly as
also
you're
those are also our fault.
sure. And then again, so that's where you and I will differ. I will take some responsibility, but I have been on the other side, and a great deal of it still falls on me. Now you can. So then in that case, I think you maybe you are being a little bit of a martyr. We want to take how much responsibility, because if we take the responsibility for the losses, right? If we depending on how much responsibility, I think it's annoying me, depending on how much
Obviously,
responsibility you decide that you want to take for the losses, then we are taking away all personal responsibility and accountability from the athlete, and I
no,
don't
because
think that's fair.
I don't share that with them. I don't
Okay.
call them after the fight, and I'm not like, hey, that's on me. And this is my personal. The flip side is I take no credit for the win.
Yeah, I don't know even if we're not sharing that with them, and obviously we don't share that with them, but that I don't know if I feel like that's fair. I've always told
That's
you I don't think it's
yeah,
fair to
no, but that's
you,
me.
but of course, so that might just be a you problem.
You think Kirby Smart doesn't take every loss like it's his fault that he didn't coach them well? And so
I
that's so coach. I extend coach to all of those pieces, right? It's not just what we're doing in a room. I am the coach. And so every piece that went into the win or the loss, I am going to I influence. Maybe it's just through the environment, maybe it's through expectations, intentions, building those things, whatever it is. And so I acknowledge that the win is their work. And so all I can see is that where the process broke down. And if I guide the process, the environment for the room, then that's how I mentally, those are my mental gymnastics to take the losses incredibly hard and not get much out of the wins.
sure, and I hear all that, but it's there are still some things I believe we've talked about this before. I believe that there are some things you can't fix even in the room. So there are still pieces. I believe there are still pieces. There are still ways that you shape the environment that are going to have no effect on certain aspects of a fighter. And so I don't think all things can be fixed in the room. Some things have to be fixed by the athletes. And I don't think there's anything you can do in the
Or
room
or
to
a different
fix that.
type of professional.
Different type of professional or maybe a different environment. Now, if you want to say that you shape an environment where you tell your kid to go somewhere else, then okay, then maybe you can, maybe you
We've done
control
that in the
all of it.
past. We
Well,
have done that. We have done that in the past. Suggested people go somewhere else.
or get this extra coach, extra training in a different room to feel maybe an athlete whose confidence fails him in a fight, even though you see his confidence definitely doesn't fail him in the room, maybe sending him somewhere else for some of that extra training shows him that, oh, I don't really know this person. This could have easily have been someone I fought on a Saturday or Friday night. And I held my own and did very well and didn't fail in these other places where had it been a fight, maybe I would have failed myself. So if that's you controlling the environment, then sure, you have control over that. You tell your kid, hey, I really need you to go here. There's going to be some guys that you're going to train with at this place or that place. Yeah, you got to drive a little bit.
Right.
Yes, you have to put some of your other life on hold, but how badly do you want to figure out how to get past some of this? So go do this
Yeah.
thing. Or if we don't change how we train, then our expectation is it's not going to change in the fight. And are you okay with that? If you continue to be okay with that, then great. You're not getting hurt, you keep fighting. Or if you're not okay with that, then this is what I need you to go do. Go do it. And then that's you controlling the entire environment still as a coach.
All right. We should wrap it up.
Whatever, dude.
Um, yeah, I think I'd like to keep these an hour. Any last words?
No, I would like you and Scotty on your next podcast to discuss what I brought up in our chat about a coach will make changes in the room based upon wins and losses. You do that, Scotty does that. You're always talking about, we just talked about it today. Should we do more of this and more of that? Should we make corrections?
Right.
Steer the ship in other directions? Because
Right.
so, and we'll make those changes, and we know we will still have wins and losses. So we see fights, we see things that occur, we make changes in the room to have more success. And unfortunately, we will still have failures. So we'll win and we'll lose.
Right.
Why has why have coaches never made a change to drilling, repetition drilling? They've never made that change, yet they win and they lose. They always keep that the same. And they always keep the same, the hand pads and the bag work. They'll make all these other changes in the room, but those are two things that a coach has never changed. You and Scotty were like, done. We still win, we still lose.
Okay, let me ask you a question though.
How do we control the experiment a little bit better? Why won't other coaches control that experiment a little bit?
Why couldn't, devil's advocate, why couldn't a coach push back on you and say, okay, you've run this experiment, you've won and you've lost. Why haven't you put it back in some hand pad work?
Because we're still winning and losing. So if we're running an experiment, you and Scotty are running an experiment where you were just like, these are the variables. We've changed other variables throughout the year or throughout our time as coaches. We've changed the way we drill a little bit.
Okay, but you're not hearing me. It's the same thing.
So, but why put that
you're
back
saying,
in?
why not? So if you're saying in a traditional room where people are shadowboxing, hitting pads, drilling, perfect technique, and then sparring, and their guys win and lose, why would they not change? Why would the changes that they make over time not include looking at the shadowboxing, the hand pads, the bag work, the rope repetition? Right, that's what you're saying. But the flip side could be, if we run our experiment long enough, we're only 4 fights into this experiment as professional. We're only 4 professional fights into this experiment, right? If we have 20 fights, professional fights, and we're 12-8, then why couldn't a traditional coach say, okay, you've run the experiment, you're just about 500. Why not put back in some hand pad work, some bag work, some shadow boxing? What do you have to lose? It's the same question.
Sure. But they haven't run the other side of the experiment to know if anything would get better or worse if they make that change and get rid of it. They haven't run that experiment. And yet they're probably,
maybe they can't.
They might still, those other places that are doing all that, they're still probably batting 500 for the most part, because you're going to have people who win and lose. Some people try it and they don't do very well.
They can't magically. What would they replace that work with?
More live work.
Well, that is easier said than done.
The experiment's being run. It can be done though. Yes, and if everybody's doing all of these things everywhere, and some gyms are having even less success, but yet they're still, because the champions all do this thing, right? So, but yet some places are having minimal success, I imagine, where other places are certainly having more success.
I think you run into a little bit of what I call the football methodology or the professional sports methodology, where you do all of it, because if you pull things out that are traditionally done and it doesn't work, you lose your job. And so if people are running 2-hour professional practices, then you are also asking them to
a lot of time
shorten a practice, right? So that's a major change. You're also asking them you're asking them to make major changes that are difficult to make. And I get it.
Well, in MMA, where we've certainly made those changes. Have you gotten to the point where you think that those things should be put back in? Looking at hand pad work and bag work and shadow boxing through an ecological lens, you don't believe, even Dr. Guy from the other week, he was always coming up with ways that, because he was a baseball player back in the day, ways that you could play these things, practice these sports that are way more alive, or alive, just alive, binary, alive, and certainly way more representative. And for skill building, you and Scotty certainly don't believe that.
But I think alive is binary. Right. So I think alive is binary.
They're not creating, then those things cannot create skill transfer into you don't believe that then those 3 things, pad work, and shadow boxing, create transfer into the alive, most representative environment, which is fighting. But yet,
but do they have no value?
What's that?
Do they have no value?
Well, isn't that no? So we can't answer that. So we run the experiment and still have success.
Why not do all of it then?
Because there's only so much time in a day. And if you ask every coach the thing that they would do with 15 minutes of their time, if they only had 15 minutes, they would all say we would just spar more.
but they have 2 hours a day. They have 2 sessions a day. If you go to Vegas and guys are training 3 sessions a day, what do you want them to do with 75% of that work? Because they're only going to spar. You're only really going to spar 3 to 5 rounds.
Or you can make your entire practice some level of sparring.
You
It
can
doesn't
still
have
only
to
do
be.
that.
What's that?
You can only do that for so long.
Not if you're in a. Why? We have like
Because the
so.
body, the
But
body can
we
only take so much of that.
so then it can't be all live MMA rounds, which isn't what the pads are not giving you any live MMA work. So if
No, but it's
everything,
easier. It could be done at a low intensity.
so then do
So does low
do
intensity
less.
work have no value?
Low intensity realistic work has value. I think
I don't know if it does either.
we're running that experiment, though, aren't we? Scotty's running
But
that experiment.
how do we even know if that experiment's right or wrong?
We don't, but we know that the other experiment is neither right nor wrong.
Right. But again, point being, that experiment's being run in the NFL right now, where they do everything, and in Major League Baseball, where they do everything, and in
And
basketball,
what was the Jets record last year?
well, but they don't have a quarterback, so you're drawing like I just
Okay,
you want to
so
talk
you're
about
using two different sports that are apples
no,
and oranges.
my point is you keep talking about removing variables, and I'm saying you can't. We have not removed all the variables because the people are the variable. And so we will never, no matter what we do, unless we have every belt or a belt where we take someone from day one to day champion, this methodology, you will never be able to definitively say something is better or worse because that person probably would have been a champion in any methodology as long as they didn't get hurt. Forrest, Bryan, Conor McGregor, Merab Dvalishvili, Islam Makhachev, they're all champions regardless. And so I am not saying that we should add bag work, pad work, shadow boxing to our normal practices. I'm not saying that. I'm saying when you say to someone else, maybe you could affect your win percentage by removing these things. I don't see a difference between them saying to us, maybe we could affect our win percentage by adding those things.
Our win percentage was our win percentage better back in the day when we had more pad work and bag
No, I
work?
think if you fight long enough, if you have enough people fighting enough fights, I think your win percentage ends up in a very similar place because the fighters fight. So I think I'm not saying there aren't arguments to be made, but I don't know if it's going to work that way because they're not going to remove all those things. And if they don't remove all those things, then you still have a lot of variables, right?
Or should they just how do you, if you don't remove those things, how do you press upon a person that those things aren't doing the things they think they're doing?
Right. So that's a different question, right? You could say, why are you doing these things? What are you getting out of them? And is there a better way to do those things? Sean Mariska has this quote that I use in our coaching course and I use when I work with people. And it's basically just try and add more aliveness where you can. And I think if people start to add more aliveness where they can, and I've said to people, hey, one of our good friends, I'm going to do a workshop for them. I said, I think the best effect I can have is say to your instructor, say to you, can we make this more alive? And maybe if we help people make their practices more alive, they will see the disconnect with pad work, bag work, shadow boxing, rote repetition, mechanics. They'll see the disconnect, but maybe we can also fill so much of their time with alive training that they don't have the energy or the time for the bullshit.
Or they'll have, maybe not in that practice, but they'll have more time to go do the road work and the bag work, the road work and the sprint work and the strength and conditioning,
Maybe
things that
recovery.
have tremendous carryover, like
Sure.
and recovery. Who says you need a 2 hour practice that has an hour of this, an hour of pads, and an hour of that,
No,
an hour?
I don't know why.
Where did that come from?
I think that comes from coach wanting to control their athletes' time. That doesn't happen in the professional levels, right? There's a lot in the professional levels left to the athlete to spend their time positively or negatively. I think in a college football situation, you want to have control of those kids as much as possible.
Sure, you don't want them driving around as much or
Right.
doing stupid doing
in
stupid
Athens.
stuff.
So I'm not saying I get what you're saying, but I think boiling down what you're saying is, can you tell me what you use these tools for? Can you replace those tools with more alive training? I think that is the better path.
And if they say they're already doing that, well, then my pushback would be, well, you can't be if you're still doing all of this. And what I'm saying is, how do you, if this is not representative, this is not doing the thing you think it's doing, skill development wise. If anything, I think it might be having a counter effect
Maybe.
because if you're putting these ideas into someone's head that they have these very specific ways to act against certain movements and you're throwing these 10 punch combos, that you're actually doing the opposite because you're actually taking away some of the decision making process that needs to be used in the moment and try to shove this program that's what I should do now. But maybe that's not the thing.
Didn't you just share? Didn't you just share like Shador Stevens having a conversation with someone who was like, "Yeah, I don't throw long combos on pads."
When the F am ever going to do that and fight through 10
Yeah,
punches in a row?
right. I thought that was good. So, is there a more efficacious pad work?
We know someone who thinks there is, and
No, but I mean, maybe let's ignore our friend's pad work because I think he is one of very few that could do that. Is there a more efficacious pad work that more people could do? That's simple and gets us closer to what we think pad work is for.
sure, I don't know what it might just be very simple. Just throw some basic combos, feel your speed. You see how fast you can be? Cool. Now go
No,
over here and
but
train with this guy.
what if one of your fighters said, "Hey, coach, can we get together every Friday morning, right? Because we don't have an MMA practice on Friday. Can we get together every Friday morning at 10 o'clock and work on some stuff? I'm the only one that can come at 10 o'clock, and you're a 50-year-old man." Wouldn't padding yourself up and doing stuff where they're hitting the pads, not you, be the best that you could come up with?
And I put on little gloves, and he's basically going chest, shoulders, legs, and calves.
No, no,
Um,
no, he wants more representative work. We're not chest shoulders anymore. He's a professional fighter. He wants to work with his coach. He feels like he needs more time working with his coach to build his skills. You're not going to spar him every Friday morning. That's detrimental to him. So, do we pad you up and say, okay, you're sparring me, I'm throwing back at you, but you're not hitting me, you're hitting these?
yeah, I think that's contrived. No one's
Okay.
because
But
then
maybe
if
it's
I'm not,
contrived, but it's the best case scenario. I think this is
if
why
you
you
ask
see
me as
so
a
much.
if you ask me as a coach, what is this? Why we just ask that? Ask the coach, what do you think this is doing? And then how can you make things more alive? And as a coach, I would likely believe this is not doing anything for him other than maybe giving him the confidence that he's doing more. And maybe
Why?
that's
You
a
don't think,
benefit.
wait, you don't think
He just,
moving with a live body, throwing, no, you wouldn't be like you'd be having to catch his strikes. You have leg pads on, you have a body pad on.
so he's
Like,
just shadow boxing in front of me, right? If I'm just
no,
catching it. That's
no,
why I
you're
probably
throwing
need
back.
gloves, have him not kill me, and at least just put things
So,
out there that he
so get
really
the coach
responds
gloves.
to.
Then get the coach gloves.
Like I'm 50. If he's throwing full speed, how I'm catching all that at 50? Why didn't I just spar him?
Is it not better than nothing?
Why can't I spar him?
Because
How is this any different?
it is different. Chest and shoulders is a tool for beginners. It is not a tool for fight
It
development.
is for your 50-year-old coach who you want to beat up. This isn't
Then
it.
maybe,
This isn't
but
doing it. And
I
I'm
don't.
going to
I
throw
think
at him and catch. I mean,
maybe.
I'm 50 years old. I don't think I'm doing that either anymore. Unless he's just, and he's going really fast. He's not really throwing. Then again, we've lost what this is, the purpose of this is. And then I don't even know what the purpose of this is anymore. And then he's just kicking me in the leg because I'm not
Better than
kicking him,
nothing.
you said, because I'm old.
Better than nothing.
Is it?
Yeah, because it's opposed. It has a partner. You can still make it more alive. We would agree that there is better and worse pad work, right?
Sure.
Or you think, okay,
But I still don't think it's doing what it's proposed to be doing if it's not truly representative in some
if
way.
he's a professional, then maybe there are things that you could help him with by just being in front of him that you can't necessarily do by watching him with someone else.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, especially someone
Okay.
who's going to give him better looks and feints and actually throw stuff at him.
I don't think you. I think you need to. You're being too zealotous, but only because you dislike those training methods. I'm not saying that you're right or wrong, but I think one of the things on this podcast I am very careful to do is draw any. The only line I will draw is the worldview that we build this on. I will not. I will not allow for any discussion of a non-ecological theory.
So then when you say better, there are better and worse ways to hold pads, sure, I could walk like a robot and just turn around like a zombie. That would be probably worse than what you're describing. But what do we then think is the benefit the fighter is gaining from that? What are they gaining? How is that transferring over into the cage? And how is
It's not,
that?
but it doesn't have to transfer over to the cage. Everything,
Oh,
no,
I didn't know that. I thought everything we're trying to do is trying to be as representative as possible to the thing we do, which is
no,
fight in the cage.
we are not trying to be as representative as possible ever.
Okay. No, as possible, not representative.
Okay, so
but as
in this
possible.
situation
Okay.
where it's just you and him, he doesn't have a partner, then you can be as representative as possible. It doesn't have to transfer over to the cage because he has 7 or 8 other practices during the week where he is more representative, where he has someone during that.
Then why would he need this with me on Friday morning other than a confidence boost of working with his coach?
Because he wants your input. He wants to move with you.
A 50-year-old man?
He wants you to be able to watch him and help him.
So then it's a confidence builder for him.
But it's not just a confidence builder. Pads don't have 0 effective
he's
use.
got to take that hour of work with me on Friday morning and then go put it back into his training with his training partners who are
of course, Saturday morning, he's in there sparring.
How do we know if I've made any difference?
It only matters if he thinks you made a difference.
Exactly. It's confidence builder.
So don't discount that.
Okay, I'm not, but if we're asking me as the coach, because we talk about that frequently, you ask a coach why a coach does what he does, and he says, because my coach taught me this way, and his coach taught him
Adam in England is doing it with professional, or I mean, high-level amateur boxers, and Tobias in Germany is doing it with high-level kickboxers.
The pad work stuff?
Yeah. Okay. You saw on our little thread the other day, we put up that woman who was working her fighters and just pressuring them and hitting them and just, and they said that's what their pad work looks like. I mean, sometimes, we don't have a choice. You're not going to tell them, no, not going to work with you. You would say, hey, do you have a partner you can work with? That would be better. But that's not always possible. And maybe it's not an hour. Maybe an hour starts to become, it's too much. Maybe it's 30 minutes.
Sure.
All right, let's wrap this up. I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to try and stop recording.
Peace out.
Wait.